Didn't turn you on yet.
All right, you are unmuted now.
Now I'd like to call this meeting to what?
11:49.
Yes, I can see that. Board of Commissioners study session at 11:49. Roll call, please.
Cunningham,
Present.
Janai,
Here.
Martin is excused, Nye,
Here.
Roloff.
Here.
Sauer.
Here.
Worsakki.
Here.
Please stand for the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Any changes, deletions, additions to the agenda?
Just removing item D. We took care of that this morning.
Make a motion to approve as amended?
I'm sorry. Did you say B or D?
D.
Okay, thank you.
That you're supporting that?
I'm supporting
Thank
it.
you. That's what I heard. Motion and
Thanks,
support,
Art.
discussion.
Well, whenever you say I'm sorry, that means I really support.
Okay. Well, I'm really, really sorry. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, so moved. Minutes from October 8th.
That moves for approval as submitted.
Sorry. I mean, that's support.
Yes, yes. Motion and support, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, so moved. Brings us to our first public comment. Anybody out there? Close public comment. Jackie, you update some HR stuff? Good afternoon, not quite. So
Morning.
I just wanted to give a brief update. We have several vacant positions that we're recruiting for. The biggest one is actually a maintenance manager. We offered to two separate people and they both declined. So we're heading back out. Katie, now you're going to regroup and figure out the next plan on how to address that. But other than that, I don't have too many updates. Does anyone have any questions?
Is the IT specialist
Someone's accepted, but I typically don't like to announce publicly until
No,
they've
no.
actually started the position. But yes, someone's accepted and the tentative start date is the 25th of this month.
and we would only have one for the county?
Correct.
Okay.
And then Sophia would still be the supplemental as she has been right now. Yeah.
Okay, that was
mhm.
my concern.
Yeah.
No, one person on site, our person, and then Carhu, Sophia will still be here 2 to 3 days a week, and then at Wexford the other 2 to 3 days a week. So they're serving both counties. And she kind of lives between us anyway, so it made sense. So she'll still be here. And then the whole Carhu team will still support Benzie and support that person from a ticketing standpoint and those sorts of things. So really, we have a whole team now.
It's very exciting.
Yeah.
anybody else?
Jackie,
Yeah.
maintenance, remind me. Go ahead, Gary.
No.
Don't let me let you interrupt me.
Okay, all right.
Just,
Welcome to
It's been a
the
long
afternoon.
Yeah, right.
emergency communication specialist.
Those are dispatchers.
Oh.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Did you think Rebecca was leaving?
When actually, when I was preparing for the meeting, I thought, she's going nowhere.
Not allowed.
I got 4 more years, so do you.
Sounds like a prison term.
Great. thanks.
No, I wanted to
Oh,
ask you
great.
about the maintenance manager.
Oh, sure.
What
Um,
exactly is that? You had 2 maintenance people, correct? One of
Correct.
them's gonna be a manager or?
So
working?
that was the original plan. That's the original plan, is that the maintenance manager will oversee the position. And then ultimately, there may be a little changes going forward, but we did offer to 2 separate people and they declined. And so we're kind of going back to the drawing board to see where we can change things and go forward from there.
All right, I just wanted.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Jackie, thank you for the job you're doing.
Thanks so much. Happy to do it. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'll send you listening.
Item 8. Item 8A, discussion regarding the Water Smart Land Use Committee. Gentlemen,
Having us, Katie, do you have us, should we stand here?
Yes.
Pull up the presentation, thank you. Bill, do you want to wait there until I tag you in? Okay. All right. It's split mostly.
Do you want me to share screen now or when you're done talking?
If you would share screen now, that would be great. And we just put together a quick presentation for you all. I first and foremost want to thank you all for your support. I can't remember, Rhonda, how long ago was it? Maybe 6 months or so? I came to present and ask for a participant as part of our Benzie Watersheds Coalition, and you'll see some name changes here. So we wanted to come and give an update and tell you what we've been working on and what we've learned and what's next. And B, to say, yeah, thank you. So, whenever that was, here's an update with what we've been up to. When I came last, this was the Benzie Watersheds Coalition, and the committee name was our Planning and Zoning Committee as part of our Benzie Watersheds Coalition. But through our work together in diagnosing, and let me step back for a second to say that this group is comprised of, and you'll see the list in a second, a huge number of organizations that are dedicated to protecting our water quality here in Benzie County. We changed our name to Northwest Michigan as we have active participants from Leelanau, Manistee, and Grand Traverse County, and our focus on the district is always going to be Benzie. But this is a collaborative group. Watersheds don't respect political boundaries, and so we are now operating as the Northwest Michigan Watersheds Coalition. Through intensive learning and conversations with all kinds of stakeholders, and again, you'll see that later, we have formed an official vision and mission statement. So the Northwest Michigan Watersheds Coalition envisions a future where informed and engaged communities lead the way in protecting our watersheds for their intrinsic beauty and their cultural, social, and ecological importance. Our mission is to empower our communities to prioritize water quality in all decision-making in Northwest Michigan. It is part of our fabric of life in Northwest Michigan, and we know that not every single decision is going to be the best it could be for water quality, but we want it to be a priority in all decisions. To do the work, we have a working steering committee, our Water Smart Land Use Committee, which we'll talk about today, aquatic invasive species, and a newly forming science and research committee.
I know, I'm so talented.
This is not an exhaustive list, but a pretty good one. On the left-hand side, you'll see the Lake Association participants of the Watersheds Coalition. And on the right-hand side, we have current and existing municipalities, townships, nonprofit organizations, and such. On the bottom is kind of the important part. So we have some priority organizations that we're targeting to get more regular, more high-level involvement from the groups listed below and beyond. The point here is that as we're talking about how we protect our water quality, these folks need to be represented. The folks in the township level, farmers, kids, the conservancy folks, the folks that are, making decisions day in and day out need to be involved at the ground level. It can't be us, conservation district folks and lake association folks saying, well, you should do things differently on your farm. It's not going to go over so well. So we need broad active representation from a huge number of so here are the representatives of our Water Smart Land Use Committee. So I won't read all of their names here, but we meet monthly to discuss current events and issues and talk about our high priority goals for the future. And we'll get into those a little bit later in the presentation. But, thanks to everyone who's participating on this. It's primarily a volunteer committee and it's been going wonderfully.
John, are those all your own residents?
We go back a second, Katie. Most are. Yes, they are. I can't speak for Sarah Kirk specifically, but I think she is. Yep. And Kristen is a project management consultant actually, and also has dedicated a lot of volunteer time, and she's technically a Leelanau County resident, but otherwise, yes.
Good.
So a quick background on the approach we took to learning. Again, we don't want to impose any solutions from the outside. And so we took our job in learning about the issues that are facing our water quality really seriously. And so we followed the Acumen Academy course for systems practice, and that's a fancy way of saying this is a problem that is complex. We don't have pipes that we can remove from a river or a lake, right? It's all of our collective decisions and how we decide to live our lives, do our business, what we put on our lawns to fertilize it or not, all of these inner workings, and there's social norms, there's economics, there's all kinds of things that go into how we make decisions about our water quality that don't seem like our water quality decisions. So it's complicated. So we followed this methodology and intensively, Bill can tell you, spent over 1,000 hours talking to folks, learning the issues and trying to make sense of it.
Before you leave that slide,
Yeah,
if you would please, on the top there, where you talked about the permitting process.
Yeah.
First, that all slid back to those entities in 2010.
Yep.
Although some had maintained them before that.
Yep.
I'm curious, in your discussions with what sounds like a wide range of people, was there any discussion about that working better than working at the county level?
there has been discussion, and we heard all different opinions. Some folks like this, the way that it's working now, better than when it was. So some folks may remember Dave Long, who unfortunately we lost this year to esophageal cancer.
Niger?
Dave Long.
Oh, they won't.
Dave was an incredible person and so integral to this work and had been around a long time. He was a Blaine Township Planning Commission chairperson.
He was the chair, yeah.
Yep. And the president of their lake association. So he knew both sides really well. And he said it wasn't working well before. This is better, but that dispersed interaction and the dispersed set of rules and the way those rules are carried out adds a lot of complexity and a lot of opportunities for the system to fail. Just, things slip through the cracks, things get missed. So that dispersed nature in his mind was better than it was, but could use improvement.
Thank you.
So again, adds to the complexity of the situation. This one, okay, a list of some of the stakeholders we talked with, in the learning process. Go to the next slide. So what did we learn? Next slide. A couple big themes that we pulled out. Decision-making system is complex and confusing and not always transparent. Water knowledge gaps exist among stakeholders. So that's not only about what's happening in our water systems, and we're working to improve that. If you all come to our annual meeting this Thursday at 6 o'clock at the Mills Community House, our staff is giving a state of Benzie's water quality address, if you will. A quick update about what we know about Benzie County's water, but it's not well known. And in general, water quality science isn't well known. Good information exists, but it's not communicated well or readily available, at least in our communities, and collaboration opportunities exist between stakeholders. Every time we talk to somebody on that list of stakeholders, they said, I'm so glad you're doing this work. How can we help? How can we be involved? Everybody sees the relevance of this work. I'm not going to get into this, but this is kind of the behind the scenes stuff of what the sense making piece of it. So all of these bubbles represent stories. They represent people, or they represent some process about what's going on behind the scenes with our system that is meant to protect water quality. And so this deep learning process enabled us to create this web, and what that'll enable us to do is understand how the things we propose may positively or hopefully not negatively influence the way we protect our water quality. So one of these bubbles is actionable information. So how much do I know about water quality? How much do I know about what I can do to protect water quality? Things like that. Well, we can stack the deck in that favor. We can provide some education. We can teach people about things, but we don't also consider the norms in their community. Well, I know that, having a manicured lawn is maybe not the most best thing for water quality. It's very normal to do that, and all my neighbors have that. And I feel a little bit of peer pressure to have that same thing. It enables us to look at the whole system and make sure that we're making progress in a variety of ways. So that at the end of the day, what's really important is that we live in a community that protects its water quality. And it's going to take a huge array of things to make that possible. So I'm not going to dive into it any more than that. It's complicated. Next slide. So the current approval process, some more sort of take homes. The current approval process for land use and permitting is at the township level. There's variation from township to township. What are the rules? What is the process? And what's the follow-up? The systems analysis study identified it's complex and vulnerable to variations for many reasons. And we're working on and would like to do more work on a more detailed gap analysis of the township decision-making process. Slide. That.
So I'll introduce myself. I'm Bill Anderson. I am the president of the Platte Lake Improvement Association. You heard Will speak this morning. He was president for 40 years. I've been president for 3, and I don't think I'm going to make 40. I just don't think it's going to happen. I have to be about 115 years old. So in the last slide said what we're looking towards is a gap analysis, because we know that there's variations in terms of resource and townships, expertise. That's one of the things that we found in that initial study. Why this is important is, you know, the water in Benzie County is at risk. It's at risk because just growth in the area, development, et cetera. And one of the things you heard this morning from Will Swiecki was that there is a threshold at which you can have too much phosphorus, which is great fertilizer, and 1 pound of phosphorus creates 500 pounds of algae. Will taught me that, and it's true. So as lakes get near that tipping point of 8 micrograms per liter, and that was a level that was established in the court system back in Ingham County, back in the 80s and the 90s, as you heard, 14 years of litigation. That was established as a threshold. We have varying types of lakes within this county. Some of the lakes have very much better buffering capacity than others do. Platte Lake fortunately has good buffering capacity, but the picture there you see is Platte Lake when it was blue-green. And you can see Mud Lake, which was not really part of that, the Platte River system. Mud Lake looks great, but the other lakes were blue-green, and that happened over years and years of point source pollution from the hatchery. The hatchery was excess food, waste, byproducts of the production process, all went in the river and fertilized very effectively Platte Lake. So as we go forward, what we want to weave into our solutions is the things that people can control to affect the pollution and the phosphorus pollution of the lakes, which is really, we're not trying to split an atom here. They're very simple things that you can do: shoreline management, wetland preservation, making sure septic systems aren't leaking into the lake, fertilization, and also protections such as the overlay districts, which are put in place to make sure people who have shoreline property are following rules that will protect the lake. And we think that what we'd like to do is embed those very principles that will protect the lake into the permitting process. And go to the next slide. So one of the things this coalition is great because we've moved out of silos. And so we're working with Leelanau County, getting data from Leelanau County, getting data from Benzie County, and looking at that. And what you can see on these graphs is that these Leelanau County lakes are all showing phosphorus levels that are inching up, creeping towards that 8 microgram per liter. And, you know, all you have to do is look at Lake Erie to see what happens when you fertilize very effectively the lake. The blue-green algae blooms are, you know, we don't want to see that happening to these beautiful lakes. So you see that these, you know, in the last 12 years, they're creeping up. You can go to the next slide. Next slide. So Crystal Lake, here's the data that we have for Crystal Lake. And I have to say, and of course I'm prejudiced, but it is a fact that Flat Lake really has the most rigorous monitoring and vetted in the court system monitoring and chain of evidence, et cetera, for monitoring phosphorus and other, dissolved oxygen, conductivity, a bunch of things that we monitor in the lake. We have a very tight process. Every 2 weeks, we're out there and the data, the water samples, 8 samples. Now we're going further upstream. Those all go to the fish hatchery for analysis. And then that data goes into a database that you heard from Will that we've invested up to $60,000 to give us not just information that says, here's where you are, but it's also a predictive model to say, if you have this kind of loading, phosphorus loading within the system, this is going to be the downstream, literally and figuratively, impact on your lake system. So what we're seeing as well is that Crystal Lake phosphorus concentrations are also starting to increase. Well, Crystal Lake doesn't have point source pollution coming from a hatchery. Their Crystal Lake phosphorus levels are going to creep up as a consequence of shoreline management, shoreline best practice management not being followed, or leaking septic systems. As again, you heard from Will this morning, the septic systems, some of the septic systems on Flat Lake are over 100 years old, if they were septic systems at any time, but they're now that stuff that is leaching, as they can become saturated, starts to leach into the lake. And go to the next slide. Unlike Flat Lake, which every 9 months, because we have millions of gallons coming in from the Platte River every hour into our lake and flushing it out, we flush out in 9 months. Crystal Lake flushes out every 32 years. So it's much more vulnerable. And that's the point about, you have different lakes with different vulnerabilities to these phosphorus levels and their ability to buffer. So Crystal Lake, if they reach that tipping point, it's going to be very difficult to turn that back. So, and it's it's just the philosophy, ounce of prevention worth a pound of cure. Go to the next slide. So what we're to try to combine what John was talking about with this information, the first thing we need to do is to get a good sense for where decisions are being made about land use, which drives water quality. We want to find out, okay, where are the gaps? Process gaps, communication gaps. All these townships have different levels of expertise and capacity to make decisions about how the land is being used. So the first thing we want to do is create this toolkit that says, first of all, we'll do this gap analysis, find out what they're missing, and take the Jerry Maguire approach, for those who remember the movie, which is help me to help you, but to find out where gaps exist in terms of to build on our initial work. And then to see if we can create and to work to create a best practice toolkit, because that's what this coalition is about. It's about identifying best practice and then employing that in the decision-making process. And go to the next slide. The idea is we put people in a position to be successful. And so our goal, first of all, is to find out what they need and then to create this toolkit. And the information is there. It just needs to be compiled in a user-friendly format so that when decisions are made about land use, that omissions don't occur. And, we've seen that in this county where permitting omissions have occurred and have had significant consequences. So the idea is to make sure that these townships, which may not have the time or the resource, have a tool to help them to make good decisions about permitting land use, and also to weave in, you can see on the slide, is to weave in the education piece to the landowners to say, as you are developing your property, you need to make sure that you are employing these practices, which are lake friendly. If I can go to the next slide. So how you can help. First of all, we are, for the gap analysis, we're applying to Eagle for a $40,000 grant for that. What we are looking for from the county is help in terms of, actually, we can go to the next slide because some of this is redundant. What we'd like to do is when we create this toolkit is to make sure that it's readily available. And I've gone to the Benzie County website and I think it's an enormous resource. And I think it has the potential to host this toolkit once we get it built. And once we get it built, we'll be back to show you what this thing actually looks like. First, we would like to get a letter of support for the grant application so we can do this gap analysis. And it's nice to have letters of support when you go to Eagle and when you apply for grants. And in my previous life, I ran an emergency department. We had a research department. We applied for grants, and it's always nice to know that there is that you have a lot of support other than yourself driving the need for that grant. We also looked, when you go to the website, your website, the Caligo GIS mapping that you're using for parcel searches, we see potential that you could meld those so that actually as a cursor was over a parcel, it could actually provide that type of information to a landowner to say, oh, these are the things you need to be thinking about if you are going to be doing work on your property as part of the permitting process, whether you're in a wetland designated area or you're in an overlay district, or whatever the implications are, whatever the rules are for developing your property as they exist. These are things you need to be aware of so that less likely omissions would occur. And that, I think, is the extent of our presentation. So I'd like to open it up if you guys have questions, and anybody in the audience.
Bill, I'd like to back up with you just for a minute. When you talk about water smart land use, what are the types of land use that you would be against?
Well, there's no question that shoreline management, there are practices that are, whether I'm not against them personally, but there's just point of fact that certain land uses are not healthy for the lake. If you have a wall, retaining wall, that's simply not healthy for the lake. The lake, what you really want is a natural shoreline, so that which serves a buffering capacity. A hard fixed wall that represents an unhealthy shoreline. Even the riprap is the next step back to, it's getting towards healthier if you have riprap. But the best is to really have a natural shoreline, and ideally an undeveloped shoreline, so that the ecology of the lake flourishes.
So most people will have some kind of buffer to prevent erosion is typically what they're doing. And I see that it's popular to use rocks to do that. How do you balance the need to protect property owners' rights to use their land and protect it as they see fit versus trying to meet your objective?
Well, I don't think that those are mutually exclusive, first of all. And I can tell you, I have property on Flat Lake, and I went to the DNR 10 years ago and said, my property is eroding away. I'm losing, and we had a big rainstorm. I lost like 2 feet of waterfront. So I went to the DNR and I got riprap and I put it in. Well, the way you mitigate that, so you can do that, and I've done that. And I wouldn't say you can't do that. I did it. But the way you mitigate that is you put plants in there that will, one, help secure the shoreline, and proper plants will, have, for example, the roots of grass go down about 3 or 4 inches. Some of these plants that you can put on shoreline plants will provide a stabilized shoreline, and those roots go down, 15, 20 feet. So that helps to stabilize the shoreline. The other thing I'm doing is allowing reeds to grow out into the lake again. And I have to say, what I have seen in terms of water life occurring just by doing that. It changes entirely the dynamic, as you can imagine, as opposed to a rigid wall. But to get to your point, I'm not opposed to riprap. I put it in there, but the idea is to mitigate that so that doesn't represent a hard and fast barrier.
Because in some cases, again, using my earlier example of rock, that's quite an expensive way to go. But what I hear you saying is this is more about educating people on the consequences of what they're doing versus governing what they're doing.
Well, that's exactly right. And, and there are things that, for example, John talked about fertilization. In Lake Township, they now have a 25-foot fertilization buffer for fertilization ban. You fertilize your lawn, you're going to fertilize the lake, it's going to run into it. So you put those types of buffering zones in there. So that's exactly right, though. What you want to do is you simply want to educate people so they know what are the right decisions to make. And frankly, when I put the riprap in there, I wasn't aware really of the consequences to the lake. I simply wasn't. But like I said, now working with, John Ransom, and we did last year, we did a shoreline management class that was pretty well attended, to say, if you have this is how you can make, these are the plans, these are the types of things you can do to make that shoreline friendlier to the lake, to push for a healthier lake. The other thing, I think the real issue is going to be the septic systems, frankly, these aging septic systems, because the soil gets saturated. There is no place for that to leach except into the lake. And that's what I think is happening, for where you don't have point source pollution, like I say, Crystal Lake. And we have slides that I could have brought that say, look, here's good shoreline management. This is really good shoreline management on Crystal Lake. That's 5% of the properties on Crystal Lake. So certainly the opportunity is there to educate and for people to change, shoreline management again, and then to looking at septic systems that people are aware. I mean, the enormous amount of investment people have in these properties on these lakes, the quality of of their property value is really driven by the quality of that lake.
And I think it's important to note too, I mean, we're talking primarily right now about homes on the lake, but we need to think about, all the properties in the county, the watershed areas. If this was a tool that you held in your hand or went to your computer and you identified a parcel and it came up and said, you're in a watershed overlay area, there have been wetlands identified on your property, all the information pertinent to your parcel popped up, not only with your process for, permitting, zoning, everything that applied to your property, but also recommendations specific to where your property was located for the different plantings, different things that you can do. These aren't mandates, but it's a helpful way to find information. It really is. And then attach, perhaps you had a parcel and we could connect with down the road. We don't know how quickly. All the health department's information, because they're all digitized now as far as septic and sewer. It can tell you immediately how, old your drain field is, when the last inspection was, there's just the possibility, it's the ability to have the knowledge on your property of how to move forward with best practices. It gives the county an opportunity to partner with so many different entities to help our fragmented system become more unified. And that to me is an admirable goal. I think we're not looking, I think the townships like their autonomy in zoning and planning. I mean, that's the feedback that we seem to be getting. We're a very diverse area as far as townships. But this gives the ability to say, okay, I'm in this township, but there's a unified spot where I can get accurate, verified information about how other counties are doing it and what pertains to a parcel I'm looking at. To me, that's very valuable. Instead of coming to especially people coming to the community, is there a steep slope ordinance? Is there a wetland delineation? Do I need to start at the village level or the township level? And once I start building, there's just all these questions that if we had a one-spot toolkit, it seems to me that it would be used and very much appreciated.
Well, the specific asks to commissioners would be, one, letter of support for that grant application to Eagle. That seems fairly simple. And the other piece would be to explore the feasibility is, can we weave this into the Benzie County website and create this type of a tool model that would allow people to answer those questions easily and quickly. And this doesn't exist anywhere else, so it's gonna take a while, but once we have it, we'll be back.
Honestly, I think the DNR plays a big part in some of the stuff. We don't have the answers to all the stuff the Department of Natural Resources do. So at some point in time, they either need to be part of the web access and or in person.
Well, and John could speak to that as well, but yes, this coalition, we have current members and proposed members, and we are, looking to target specific groups. DNR, Patchery, the Road Commission. And we're looking, those, they all have a part, they have a role in terms of land quality, land use, which leads to water quality. And you saw that, all those circles, it's a pretty complicated circumstance. But you're able to take that with that mapping and find critical control points within this process that say you can leverage or you can get control of this at specific sites. For example, a land use permit starts at the township level. So if you know when land use permits are being issued, are they following the rules for, and aware? So there's opportunities to be sure. Any other questions?
I would like to add just 2 or 3 things quickly if I could. First, in addition to DNR, I know that you'll be interacting with Eagle. They're the ones that provide the permits for waterfront protection. You had said 25 feet was the barrier between land and the lake for fertilization
In Lake Township.
in Lake Township. I can tell you as a property owner there, because of the way it slopes, it probably 25 feet really isn't adequate, because eventually that's going to wash down there.
Right.
I guess I would add too, I sat on the ZBA for Platte Township Lake Township at one time. And we were violating the rules by offering somebody a variance if they'd put in a French drain and move their holding tank or septic tank across Crystal Drive. And the watershed threatened to sue all 3 of us for violating that, for offering that variance. There needs to be more flexibility. That was a logical solution. So you've got that fighting against the practicality of being able to make those kind of exceptions against what the real need is. Because you have these 10 boxes you got to check or something like that. And yet the watershed group wanted to sue us for doing what was clearly the right thing.
I can't speak to that, but the idea of integrating common sense is because you make it impractical.
Agreed.
Can't enforce it. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thoughts, comments? Okay. Discussion regarding a county land ordinance and coordinated event application.
In your packet, I provided a few documents and Rebecca's here to be part of this conversation. This is kind of twofold. One, as we grow and more people are here and coming here, we're getting more and more events that just kind of tax Benzie County and all of our partners. So we're looking at Rebecca's looking at some sort of application that really ties everybody together so that these events can be coordinated a bit better. And we can participate in those events in an efficient manner and those sorts of things. The other part of it is a county land ordinance. We don't really have anything on the books that says, hey, this is okay, this is not okay, you can and cannot do these things. And so these are kind of, one and the same, because as people hold events, they're utilizing county lands and so forth. And so
So, yeah, it is a
Uh,
twofold conversation. My background. As DNR law enforcement officer. I worked my last 6 years here in Benzie County. So yeah, I'm all about. Oh, rules about what you can and cannot do on lands. And Mr. Worsakki says, no new laws. But
Too many rules, too many laws.
this isn't asking for laws or rules. This is having that conversation because I noticed that there is no ordinance regarding some of the lands that are covering that. And we've obviously picked up a few lands that are vital. And that will get more use the more popular they get. My example, I guess I want to put in your head is the outlet. As soon as we put in a boat launch there, there's going to be people who find it. And if you haven't been to that area, beautiful, but it's also sensitive and it has opportunities. By opportunities, I mean, I have kicked people off of there for just hopping a tent and deciding that that's where they're going to live for a while. In my other job.
Right.
So, with that consideration, same with the Benzonia Township Park. What you don't want to do is have all of a sudden have that collection of people. And this isn't housing, homelessness or anything like that related, but I think that it's actually worse to have a situation and then try to make a rule to exclude. The optics of that are very bad to say, hey, we got a guy who keeps staying in this park all the time. We're gonna make a rule now as though that he can't do that anymore. It's very focused. And again, noticing that Benzie County, we're lucky because we get buffered by the state land. Trust me, I've worked all that state land. We have all of that state land between us and some of our primaries. Again, mentally think of like the outlet or again, the conservation district. I mean, it could even be behind the animal control office. You don't realize there's a little bit of land that someone could decide they're gonna put up a tent or do anything with. We have park on the north end of the lake, that kind of thing. So again, I wanted to present to you guys, and I have not talked to Parks and Rec regarding that because the reason one, I had a conversation with Katie first. And then we said, well, we're just going to bring it to a study session and have that conversation here because since there was so much conversation about Parks and Rec, I had already done this research on the authority of ordinances and things like that. So I quick threw these together for you because maybe you'll look at it in the future, not necessarily about this conversation, but you asked about why is the Drain Commission around? Here's the statute that says that. So this might help you going forward with your appointments or whatever. And in the statute, it pretty much says that the county board is the authority over the lands, obviously, that is the county. And that the board has the authority to make ordinances. And it also tells you what you can charge for a violation of an ordinance if you should have. There's actually a minimum standard that you can't just say, I'm gonna charge everybody $1,000 every time they park in this park. You can't do that. So I just wanted this thing that I just handed or put on your desks before the meeting is just kind of a reference for you to go, oh, I didn't know that it was Public Act 261 of 1965 that has the rules as to why we have our Parks Committee / Commission. So that's the ordinance conversation. I guess I wanted you to consider with some improvements like the boat launch on if you've never been to the outlet, again, realize what could happen there and to have maybe some rules in place for that use and land use around that area as it becomes more popular. That whole area is becoming more popular. There's no doubt about it. I rather see us try to maybe protect those areas ahead of time instead of being reactive and then looking like it's very targeted at a certain group of people because of that. So that was the conversation on ordinances. An ordinance could decide that this is what, that you might need I don't know,
Use permit?
use permit. And again, I don't want to say permit per se, because that's not the direction we wanted to go, so. Reminding you, that I don't chair, I end up being the secretary because no one else can take the notes. For both the local planning team meeting and the LEPC, both of those are kind of state required. Those LEPC is very focused on, the hazardous materials in the county. That's what we focus on. We do the plans for Graceland and the fish hatchery and things like that. The LPT is comprised of mostly the first responder entities and community entities surrounding Benzie County. So I have the Red Cross on there. We've incorporated some of you kind of disbanded EMS. We made sure that we included some EMS folks in there. Tom has always been on that plan, but we included the ME's office and Elmira and Thompsonville EMS because they are that work separate from just Tom. So we tried to be all inclusive. So it's an actual large group. Anywhere from, like I said, Benzie bus to the ME's office to the sheriff, police chief, a couple of different fire chiefs on there because they have different specialties that they're there for. So the local planning team, we focus on all those public safety type things that surround Benzie County. The local planning team is what comprise the lockdown drills and plan exercise that we had earlier in the year. We had a group of people that were working through that. So know that those people, I guess, exist and are trying to do work. And I think I'm on the agenda for next month too, regarding the emergency operations plan, which has been a giant project, like a 2 or 3 year project. So think hazard mitigation, but think of all the emergencies that we have to plan for. One, we're required to plan for, and two, who's been doing that this whole time, because you may not have heard it in a while. So in the local planning team meeting, I mentioned, because we talk about Ironman, we talk about this or that, and I do put out an annual, and it grows annually, you know, when I hear about things, list of what's going on in Benzie County that might have an impact on EMS, fire, law enforcement, that type of thing. Like Ironman, think Ragnar Rally. If you don't know what Ragnar Rally is, you probably did last year because they made more of a stink last year than they usually do. We have other events that cross. So one of the things that came to, brought this to a head was we had a group come out of Leelanau County. Leelanau County did the plan for this group. It's called the Manga Grit. It is, they don't have a whole lot of participants, but they went from 9 last year to, I don't know, 20 this year. No one even told me it was going through the county. No one told me that it was the night before Ironman and that they were going to be occupying the same road and the same trail that Ironman is also occupying, putting up signs for. They didn't conflict because it was the night before, but it would have been like, hey, good to know. Also, hey, good to know there's 20 people on an endurance bike race going down the Betsy Valley Trail between here and Thompsonville. And what if we get a 911 call? No one knows why these goofballs are out there if we didn't know. So I reached out to Leelanau and I'm like, hey, you gotta loop me in on the plan, especially if the route goes through my county. Oh yeah, it goes through you, it goes through Grand Traverse. It's like, hey, thanks for the heads up. I had to ask for that. Ironman was the people who actually told me, hey, is there another thing going on that we heard about? Because those types of people hang together with their endurance races. But so that brought this conversation to a head that said, okay, Benzie County is obviously a destination spot for really cool, fun things to do outside of Traverse City, because Traverse City is like, no, we don't have any more room. We got Cherry Festival, that's it. So they come here and we have space and we have room to do that. And we have these beautiful resources to do it. Betsy Valley Trail being one. And I said, okay, but what happens when they start to clash? So the planning team said, hey, Becky, yeah, let's see if we can come up with a process. Because what happens now is an event coordinator might call and say, hey, Benzie County Road Commission, we want to run a relay race through your county, all the way from Lake Ann through Joyfield and Blaine. Okay, cool. Fill out this form. Here's our permit process. Cool. And they're always really good at it. They'll say, by the way, you probably should let the sheriff's department know that you're having this thing. Or, you know, by that, they mean 911 or somebody. So they call the sheriff's office and the sheriff goes, cool, no disrespect to the sheriff, but that's it. He doesn't bring it up at the LPT meeting. It slips his mind. He goes on vacation. It doesn't mean this sheriff, but any sheriff. Or, you know, it only went to 911 and they didn't think about all the other people who should know about it. Hence, it didn't make Becky's list of things that she sends out to people. So, this year, Ragnar in particular, not only changed the direction of their race, which changed the time that it went through Benzie County, because before it didn't used to be a disruption. But they changed it. So it used to run from Muskegon to Traverse City. They changed the direction. Now it goes Traverse City to Muskegon. And that changes when the people are in the county. And people weren't ready or used to it. And so they were confused. Then you go to the website and it doesn't give you a copy of the route. It doesn't give you any data points for, because I went, oh crap, they did this, you know, to get anything out to the public. If you looked at my Facebook page or whatever, pre-Ironman, it was like, hey, road's gonna be closed. Hey, here's the map. Hey, here's this, especially if there's gonna be a big disruption. So we went, how can we take, again, the road commission didn't do anything wrong. The sheriff didn't do anything wrong because he said, yeah, it looks good to me. And that was it. But we didn't realize that there's, what was some of the issues with that? 911 didn't know anything about the direction or the time that all these people were going to be running on the roads. We had some road rage incidents that got called in. It's good to know that Ragnar was up. Elmers didn't realize that there were going to be that many people on County Road 669. And actually, you know, with cones and everything running along that lane, that is their main thorough route. They're like, we're going to change directions. Had we not known we're going to blow all these people away, all these cones would blow over every time a gravel train runs through. That's their normal route. Good to know. Is Elmer's in my group of people that I contact? No, but if we would have made some public announcements, it probably would have helped. 2, talking with the coordinators of the group and asking them for either a safety plan or an agenda or even a map of the new route with the times, and coordinating with me like they do, like Ironman does. It doesn't have to be this extensive, but at least tell us what's going on and meet with us. Probably could have said, okay, do you realize that is a major gravel train route? You know, take some extra safety precautions on that road as opposed to River Road, which doesn't have as much traffic or has a trail next to it or something. So, the hard part is when they call just the sheriff and the sheriff goes, yep, I'm going to put 2 guys on duty that day for overtime. Are they getting compensated by the event holder themselves? I think the county should be compensated just like they are for Ironman, for Ragnar or anybody else that they work for. And, especially for overtime, because money's limited at the sheriff's department. And 2, did the EMS know? Did 911 know? Did everybody get the message that it's happening? And that's where it seems to fall short. So I talked with the road commission. They included this topic in one of their meetings. I don't know if Gary was at that one. About, hey, yeah, that's a good idea, because we're like, well, we only want to know what you're doing on Benzie County lands, because that's really the only authority we have over anything. We can't ask them to fill out a permit if you're doing something in Frankfurt or Beulah or anything like that. Would roads be included in Benzie County's, lands type stories? So we coordinated with the road commission. We said, hey, you got your permit process. how can we direct them to coordinate with us, even if it's just who's in charge, how do I get a hold of them, what's your plan, and even if your plan is called 911, the plan. And, you know, how many participants are gonna be and what's our window? So that that message gets out to EMS or 911, that we know what's going on out there. And so we thought if we put something on the webpage that was, I just called it I didn't call it a permit, a coordination form is what I called it. And pretty much the cover sheet or in your packet, the Deer Perspective event holder. I pretty much copied everything that the Betsy Valley Trail uses, and maybe it's a little bit of overkill, but that's where these two documents came from. The first one was saying, hey, thank you. Here are some things you need to consider if you're going to do anything on Benzie County lands or along Benzie County roads. One, did you get a permit from the road commission? So we're kind of doing the whole back and forth. And two, you know, what is it? Is it gonna be a big event or is it not going to be a big event? Do we care? And at least we find out ahead of time instead of going, okay, it's not gonna be a big deal. And then we find out I think it was a really big deal, and I think people should have mentioned it, that we had a kayak race going from Manistee to Empire because people died in that race. It's like, hey, just let us know what's going on so that we know that there's hundreds of people out there in rough waters with kayaks. We would have put a marine. So I think having these coordination is what helps. So I'm trying to find the best way to coordinate. So the LPT said, yes, Becky, we think that planning and coordinating is a good thing. Move forward. And so my next step forward, obviously, without talking to Parks and Rec, is to talk to the board. That's on the board. So in this respect, I don't know that we don't have an ordinance that says you have to fill out this form. So we can't force anybody to fill out this form. But I was coordinating with Katie and saying, hey, can we at least make this form available so that the sheriff can say, you know, you're having an event, go to the website, click on the form, fill that out, and then I'll follow up with you. Instead of going, yeah, it looks good, and then finding out EMS really needed to know that there was 100 people in a remote area or something like that. So same with the road commission. They're like, yeah, if you point them in our direction to make sure they're actually doing the road permits for our end, we'll point them back in your direction and make sure that they coordinate and have a safety plan in place and that you know that this is going on. So it kind of gives them the whole thing without just being like, Troy sending me an email that says, hey, did you know this was going on? It's more formalized, I guess. So the Deer Perspective event holder is just kind of the a synopsis of, I guess, what we would like to, the message that we would like to send to them. And obviously it's up for any revamping or whatever. The Benzie County Special Event Coordination Form was kind of the whole fill in the blank thing. I don't have the capability, mostly because it's a software issue. But this resembles the Betsy Valley Trails fillable PDF form. It actually might be overkill because a lot of these are the questions that the Betsy Valley Trail asks. And we may decide that it's not necessary, that if we get the basic information and Becky communicates with the event coordinator, that we can find out, we don't need all these extra check boxes. It's just a waste of time. Or we can say, oh, wow, your event is more impactful than we thought. We need to have like a safety meeting, which we do for like the Sunrise Rotary. I meet with the two people in charge of the Sunrise Rotary bike tour just to cover some bases because we cross some streets. They ask for cert. What happens if someone crashes? You know, that type of thing. So it's very non-invasive, but it gets all the information shared. I meet with in Elmira Township for the 5K there, you know, those types of very non-invasive. We make sure everybody's on the same page. We thought of everything that we can think of, and we have a good and safe event that doesn't screw up everything. I'm not really asking for permissions of anything. I just wanted you to see it, consider some control efforts, I guess, to kind of I don't think it's gonna slow down. Last year was really busy and that's when we started to overlap and I went, it's not gonna be any different next year. Or the next year, or the next year. I'm not saying once Ironman goes away that there isn't, that it might be different. I'm just gonna say. Someone else is just gonna fill in that blank. I just want to make sure that the county is covered and that we're taking all the efforts we can to protect not only the participants, but inform the county that people. So Ragnar did have a lot of public hubbub on the overheard pages. What's going on? Why isn't it in? Why didn't anybody tell me about this? It's like, I probably would have put something out had I even been informed from the coordinator what was going on. I had to all of a sudden see that and react. So, what do you mean? Why is this there? This normally doesn't happen. And then, so their person actually did reach out and say, hey, how'd it go? And I'm like, nah, you need to include us. And what happens with Ragnar is not like Iron Man. They like call us 2 weeks ahead of time and say, hey, we need a cop and we need this. And I think 1 year Greg actually said, we're not helping you because we have to post that overtime with them. You know, they have contractual requirements for posting overtime and we can't just take a person off the road to help your traffic crossing. It's just not how it's going to go. So we actually told them no, but doesn't mean they still didn't go through the county. Now they're doing it more unsafe because it was a busy crossing. Anyway, thoughts, comments?
Years ago, quite a few years ago, there was some type of athlon that was 5 people on the team. One stretch where somebody rode a bike, the other 4 ran. The next stretch was somebody rode a horse, the other 4 ran.
Wow.
So it was different. So take the weakest person and give them the easiest job, which would have been a bike or a horse.
Right.
or
They
that
have
kind of
relays
stuff.
for
So
those
you could have
type
literally
races,
4
too.
studs and 1 weakling. For support. That was. We hauled a ton of horses down there. There's a little lake just south of Manistee, I think, with an access on it. I can't remember. But I know we hauled horses all morning. We hauled horses back from wherever all evening. But it was very unique, and I think they came out of Chicago, but I'm not sure. And we were only involved with 20 miles of it or something like that. But it was pretty wild.
Yeah, the Mongo Grit, that gentleman goes all over the place. And he's actually from South Africa, I believe, or something, or that endurance race goes through there. If it gets more popular, it will. I had conversations with another guy who wanted a 100-mile foot race. They do in other places. He wanted to come up through the Betsy Valley Trail. He was doing his due diligence.
We'll run in circles for a while.
I know they were gonna run from Manistee on the national, or on the Manistee Trail that runs through, and then it was gonna connect to the Betsy Valley Trail, but it's gonna end in Frankfurt. Everybody wants to end their exciting journey in Frankfurt lately, which means Benzie County.
Mhm.
You know, and along our roadways and on our pathways and for our state land and things like that, so.
Trying to think of in my district, what events would be impacted, but I can think of the Crystal Lake Marathon.
Yeah,
The July 4th 5K. Are these, so what would that look like now? These are
So-
standard events that
Yep.
have been going on year after
again,
year.
if it's something so small. I'm disappointed that Mr. Kelly doesn't at least coordinate a little bit better his road closures. He goes straight with the sheriff and says, I want these roads closed.
That's what this would impact though. It would say,
The sheriff has the authority to close roads, but it's really for emergencies. He really should have coordinated with the road commission. Does the road commission know that the event's going on? Does he know that there's booths set up on the side of the road handing out, within the right of way of that safety for other people, not only for their participants. So it's not a fee, not intention of a fee. It's just, do we know what's going on? Do we know the dates and times? Is everybody aware? Does EMS know that there's 100 kids running this just race around the lake. So Benzonia Township. Yeah, the Ragnar runs through Benzonia Township. Ironman doesn't. Portions of the Betsy Valley Trail come through Benzonia Township. So those people who are, the trail has its own rules, but again, the trail doesn't coordinate or tell us that anything's going on. So I don't know if we need to have a SharePoint or if we need to just say, hey, because this mentions making sure you have the trail. The trail can probably say, hey, maybe you should make sure, this sounds like a big event, you might want to coordinate with it.
Where's the threshold for a big event? Like, Bob's Lake Ann had their, the 5K run.
I think.
The one happens in Beulah. Are those below the threshold of what we're talking about?
Probably wouldn't even notice it, probably be okay, but I think impacts to, well, in this particular event process, anything that gets based on or impacts the lands and then probably the roads, but road commission needs to know that you're having a 5K or something along their roads. That's really required. So they just say, hey, you only got 12 people, it's probably not a big deal. Hey, do you have a
Both
plan?
of those 5Ks are pretty big, pretty well attended. I mean, and they
What
go up
happens if-
Homestead Road, all the roads within the.
Yeah, but they've never coordinated with me. What
Okay,
happens
so I'm
if
saying
they have something?
it would impact those.
Yeah.
I
What's
guess
your
the other-
plan? Oh, we're just gonna call 911 if somebody falls down the pool. That's a plan. Just wanna make sure, does the EMS know that we have a race going on and there might be a bunch of people who are tired of that.
But if they normally reach out to the sheriff, couldn't the sheriff, you just have a group email that sends it to Hubers and
I can show you all the emails where I beg all of these people to share information.
but
That says, if you know something's happening, please share it with me so I can put it on this form that I send out to everybody.
But if people normally reach out to the sheriff, it's like he would have just. Now, he receives it and sends it out to the other entities. In theory, that sounds good.
So, could I,
Then the road commission, they also just find out, and they make their needs met and that's cool and they forget.
I would like to chime in with most counties have a policy that the board sets that says those shall be notified and there shall be an application. That's why the application is in place for the Betsy Valley Trail. This application is in place throughout the region because most have copied it. If this board sets a policy that says you shall on county properties, well, then you shall. And I think it makes sense to have some sort of application for coordination because all of those 5Ks should be on the same page. They all should be closing the street in the same mechanism. They all should be notifying the same people. So it makes sense to put some sort of boundary around this. I would say it is of my recommendation that the Board of Commissioners establish an ad hoc committee, invite the road commission, invite Rebecca, invite the sheriff and say, okay, how are we doing this going forward? And let's create a policy. Let's create this streamlined form. Everybody follows the form. That policy could determine, or that policy in the ad hoc could determine what constitutes an event of this sort of nature. Is it more than 100 people? Is it more than 3 days in duration? Is it? That group of folks could determine what seems feasible to have to do a form or something as such as this.
One of the things that occurs to me because it's such a gorgeous spot is, the new outlet Railroad Point weddings.
Yeah.
I'm really nervous about the outlet point just because, again, it's gonna get a whole lot more attention with the increased infrastructure and its area. I mean, if you think about it, just the people who go down there right now just to hang out on the beach. They pull the boards out of the waterway and they do all kinds of, they climb on the waterway, it's kind of play on that. And it's safe sometimes, but not safe if you're gonna have 100 people down there having a full beach destination wedding where you met.
Well, and the policy could determine too, these properties are not suitable for events such as this. So that we don't have those sort of issues. Hopefully, I mean, you're still gonna have the people who just do it and we can't catch everybody. But at least we could put some sort of boundary onto what's an event, what kind of events do we have, what determines a large impact event, who needs to be notified, just putting some around it all.
And mostly it's just a center point. I mean, if someone checked with Crystal Lake Township and they said it was okay to do that, cool, but did we know about it? Did it have an impact on the trail? Was there damage to our property? And if so, who was in charge? Well, I didn't get a name. It's just more like a protection, not trying to make major control over anything. And again, no, it can be slimmed down quite a bit if we want, but just to have that conversation, yeah. It doesn't consider it to be a big impact. Thank you. Or all these 5Ks are on the same day. Hey, did you guys know that?
Yeah.
And I wanna talk to each other.
I think an ad hoc makes sense. Invite those other players and start the conversation and move towards a policy and an application that makes sense for the events, that determine the size of what constitutes an event needing an application. Just get everybody around, have sort of an event planning meeting, as you will, to get everybody on the same page and then go from there.
Cool.
And we can get other counties examples, because all the counties that touch us for the most part have a policy in place, have applications in place. So we're not recreating the wheel. Yeah, even Grand Traverse County, more than 10 people shall have a permit. 10 people is what they consider an event. Just says, look at it.
So you get a couple of your kids home and throw together 12 bikes to go down the trail. Yeah.
And again,
There's no prizes.
Right. So you guys can do as you wish. I mean, that I'm just saying though, like, if you want to use Grand Traverse County's property and you have 12 people, technically you need a permit. So, but Benzie County can determine what they constitute. Maybe it's exceeds 100 people and exceeds 12 hours in duration. Okay, well, now we need to sit down and talk about this. Maybe it's 50 people. I don't know, but I think it makes sense to call the group together and say, okay, what do we care most about? Not that we don't not care about everything, but what events are going to have any sort of impact on us that we should be aware of?
And the local planning team, the impacts in their brain are, is there going to be a road closure that might impact how ambulances and fire trucks? Is there going to be a mass group of people that we need to at least know exist and pay attention to in case someone decides to drive their van assembly? And do we, again, is it rural and remote? We need to realize that it's going on. So if someone says we have a biker down, in the middle of the Betsy Valley Trail, Thompsonville, that we're like, oh yeah, we know what those people are. And at least Thompsonville knew that they needed to drive a truck in from a certain angle or vice versa, that they knew it existed instead of going, what the hell are we doing out here? What is off the dog? We're not gonna get everything. It's just kind of the impact to infrastructure and resources. Yes.
Do we need an ad hoc, or is this something we toss back to Parks and Rec to partner with the road commission to come up with a direction?
I think this board needs to be sitting around that table, because ultimately you have the hardest hammer in all of this. I mean, it's already been expressed that the requests have been made from the partners to notify so that we don't have overlapping, and it's not happening. So I think you sitting at the table has much more impact in the conversation.
So you've laid out a whole lot of questions that need to be answered. And I'm sure there are going to be other questions along the way. I think that's good advice, Katie, that we develop some type of committee, including a number of commissioners, because it falls to the county. In your presentation, you're talking about Ragnar. I have no idea what that is.
A bike
Yeah.
race.
Just a race.
It's a RAGNR, if you Google it, it's a relay race of like 5 people, except there's no horses or bikes, where they just run, walk, they dress in costumes. In fact, some of the signs you saw along the road, like the one in Honor that says there is an event happening, just FYI, that was actually for Ragnar, not for Ironman, but most people thought it was for Ironman, the big.
And aren't they all first responders?
What's that?
Aren't they all first responders?
Oh,
I don't think so.
They're in their teams of so many people and
Yeah,
you run this far and you
is have the 4 other people are in a van and
Right.
one person does their 5 miles and then
Oh,
then they swap out and the next person does 5 miles and they may all have
Usually,
a goal or something in mind. It's just a relay.
Mhm.
They make stops. Sorry, they make stops at the regular stops around here when they went the one way.
St. Ambrose.
To be St. Ambrose and then like you have the camp. And whatever else, you know, like. for
had
lunch
5
stop.
drunk people.
Yeah.
Usually they did it at night here. And that's why most of the time you didn't notice it. I had
Now it's
another
on.
concern because once you talk road closures, those have to be approved by the township.
They should be.
Yeah, I mean.
I mean,
they're
the
not
road
always
commission's
happening.
got-
Road Commission has a
Yeah.
procedure and their policy is
So
that
that's a
township has
concern
to
too.
approve
It's
it.
not.
Some of them are just
Yeah.
road crossing, you know,
Right,
but they should still be informed, yes. And so it would be, okay, on us, we need to make sure that the township
Mhm.
realizes that the
Mhm.
cops are closing down, making 31 for sections when there's bikes crossing for the
they had to pre-approve a lot of that for the Ironman.
Ironman, yes. A lot of these other ones are just slipping by and we have, and I will tell them. The road commission, I guess, is that authority, but I always tell them we can't close the road. Tell Mr. Kelly that all the time, close the road, but he wants the road closed. For his runners, because they're on a time basis. I had that conversation with Almira. I said. We will let people cross when it's clear and we will be there like crossing guards, but they're like, no, that is a 5K timed. You need to close the road and the runners have priority, like, you gotta run that by the township and you have to run that by whatever, and so the fire chief mans that now, I don't.
There's a heck of a lot of coordination that needs to be done, and you're bringing up a lot of stuff that I just probably haven't paid attention to, but it's very important.
And I think going forward, so far, we've been able to just kind of manage it, but
Mhm.
again, last year I was overwhelmed with the number of. Things that were going on that were coordinated, because we just weren't communicating. Not for any ill intent purposes, it's just everybody was doing their own thing, or it got. So just trying to formalize.
So to Rebecca, as I said earlier, there's a lot of unanswered questions. Some questions we don't even know yet. You know, you're gonna be deciding whether it's a policy or an ordinance. You're gonna have to decide who's the central contact. How do I even enforce any of this? And to enforce it, what are the consequences of violating it? A lot of work to be done yet, but I can see that it's so fragmented that the more events we have coming into our community, the more risk we have from a public safety perspective even. And we need to get control of that, is what I hear you saying.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get ahead of. I always try to be ahead of the ball instead of being. So, yeah, there's nothing, this is just a guideline of. Of a train of thought. It really is nothing more than that. And again, I stole it. The trail who stole it from the county.
That's,
For Grant Evers.
Isn't that the best thing for flattery, I guess, stealing?
So if I could have some volunteers from this group who would like to be part of those conversations, and we'll get a hold of the road commission and the Betsy Valley Trail, and let's start those conversations and then bring something back forward.
I'd be happy, sure.
And you hit a lot of pegs, yeah.
So,
If we only had somebody with law enforcement background that could participate.
who's that? Oh,
You were part of the city ones.
Of what?
You were part of the city ones back in the day, so you would be good when we did them back in the day,
Yeah.
like 2011.
Yeah.
So you should be part of them.
But I'm on it. I'll be on it. That's fine.
Anybody else? Tim Markey serves on the LEPC and LPT, so
Yeah,
maybe
he's the LPT chair, so maybe we. could-
Would Tim be-
Yeah, is that-
I'm gonna call him right after this, so I'll let him know he was
Oh,
voluntold.
Volunteering.
it's already on there.
So then that would be, you wouldn't want to have more than those three.
No.
No,
You don't want to have a
because
quorum.
the road commission Present, obviously Gary would fill the gap of the,
No, I'm talking about from the commissioners.
oh,
You don't want more than three.
Yeah, we want the sheriff's office, the road commission.
probably Tom, but he was. Again, some of that could be relayed back to the LPT through all those people. It doesn't need to be. Yeah.
So it looks like you got the three from the commission.
Mhm.
Thanks.
Cool.
Sorry that took so long. I was trying to do kind of two things at once.
That's okay.
I'm
Covered
sorry,
all the
what day is
bases,
it?
So
I think you got a real.
It's afternoon now.
this afternoon.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item C, discussion regarding marijuana funding allocation.
Weed.
Weed.
Every year, the Board of Commissioners gets an allocation based on the marijuana establishments we have within the county. The last couple of years, we've been trending around the $230,000 mark. The first year I was here, you had a resolution in place that said those excess funds would go to the unfunded liability with MERS. We then rescinded that resolution and we had given money to Benzonia for the feasibility of the water sewer. And then those funds were just absorbed into the general fund, the rest of them. So I'm bringing it back before you again and asking you, how do we want to handle those funds? Do we want to send them to MERS? Do we want to just absorb them into the general fund? Do you want to establish a purpose for those funds? Those are excess funds that, you know, they're given to us based on our establishments. This year they are factored within the general fund. It's really up to you how you want to spend those funds. Last year we didn't do anything with those funds. They just sat in the general fund and, you know, were utilized as part of balancing the general fund, but quite frankly, they weren't necessarily needed to balance the general fund. So I want to hear from you what your thoughts are, because we haven't talked about this in about a year. I just want to make sure we're on some sort of path.
When do those come in generally?
Let me go back to those quick. So last year we received them in about February. And then the year before that, we received them in March. So spring of 25.
And we have some unused funds from the previous years.
Yeah, well, because the audit's already done, they're just gonna show up in fund balance. And that's where it all ends up, is in fund balance. So we can choose to pull from fund balance and use them for other purposes. With this fiscal year as well, you know, we budgeted funding into contingency. So in essence, those funds are gonna be the contingency, part of the contingency.
So I'm glad you brought it up. And I had commented earlier when we were getting department head reports, when Kyle was talking about this. I know it's really, only a 1-year event, but there are certain programs that we're not going to be able to fund that has to do with the prisoners. And I think that we should allocate some of those funds for that purpose. Only committing it to 1 year, but at least we could continue those things for another year.
Yeah, education, so the GED program is the one item that we were cutting per se, and that was about a $10,000 to $15,000 hit.
And
is all.
Whatever those are, I'd leave that up to you and the sheriff. I just think that I would like to be able to continue some of those programs if we can find the funding, acknowledging that this is a Band-Aid. But at least we'll fix it for this year. That would be my thoughts on some of the monies.
And that's gonna be 10 to 15,000 is all, and we're budgeted to receive about 230,000.
And I'd ask that you look to see what other programs we've had we're having to discontinue.
There was no other programming, no.
That was
the
it?
rest of it was tightening down on supplies and, spending. And then moving the one position into the general fund. So in some way, we're already, offsetting that because we moved in a $75,000 position into the general fund. So that's already in the general fund. And then cutting the one position. But the only program on the list that was being cut was that GED program, which is $10,000 to $15,000.
Okay.
So my,
Rhonda and I won't agree, but I'd still like some of it percentage to go to MERS. Trying to get us caught up.
Yeah.
Oh, it's-
Well, and I will remind you too, I will remind you,
It's over here, Gary, it's over
The
here.
whole side,
I did put $100,000, remember, to be an additional payment to MERS in the budgeting process, and you asked that it be pulled out. So that's not in the budget anymore. I put it in the draft budget and then it was removed.
So
So
are we talking about the stuff that we're gonna be getting or the stuff that?
Both, I mean, because it's gonna, what was last year will end up in fund balance with this audit, the audit's in the midst right now. And then projecting what we're, for what we're gonna get in the spring.
Put some into the capital budget for all the stuff that tends to break all the time?
So you'll notice, and you'll probably recall, we didn't do any transfer to capital this year because we still have over a $500,000. I'm sorry. You'll notice in the
We can
general,
just Spaced out for like 3 seconds.
holy mackerel. We still have over a $500,000 in ARPA dollars to spend in the capital fund, so we didn't put additional funding
Okay.
in there for the purpose of, we don't have the manpower to do more than what we already have funded, and so we didn't put additional,
There's plenty in there for now.
yeah.
if
You
we're
could
just
put it in
gonna-
there to save
Mind if I go?
for later.
Is there some programming like the sobriety programs or anything like that?
So drug court is all through a grant, which you and I need to connect after this meeting to sign that grant. It's due Friday. That's all through grant through the state already. Yeah. And we already expanded the program with opioid dollars. So that's done.
So because we're just throwing things against the wall.
Yep.
Could we consider providing some funding to the Village of Honor for that build out of that playground that they have?
You could.
I think they're about 70,000 shorter. I don't know what the number is, but
You could consider that, definitely, but be prepared for every other township to come to you.
I get that. I understand that completely.
Yep.
Dollars working.
Well, the money's got to get back to the community. It's the taxpayers' dollars.
Yeah, so
There
the
you go.
capital fund, you said there's a $500,000. How many years out are we funded then for capital projects?
So let me just pull the report. So we have about $353,000 in the fund balance of capital improvement, plus about just over $500,000 of ARPA dollars left over. So 2 to 3 years at least, and then chipping away at some long-term items, planning for the future, for the rooftops in the future. I still have devices for the commissioners as a long-term item. So there's various other long-term items on there. But our capital fund, based on the manpower we have to actually do some of the jobs, we're pretty set for this fiscal and next fiscal year. Because we don't have the capacity to do tons of things.
And I'm
And
glad
that's
that,
for general fund.
and I'm glad that we're doing the planning, having a structured plan as we do. But I think there's some things with technology we've not even talked about yet that can improve the efficiency of the county. That could absorb some of those dollars. And I don't know what that is right now, but as time has gone on, it's been clear to me that we're using technology, we're creating greater efficiencies. We should be looking at that more closely.
Katie, I have questions. Now that, like, do we expect that amount of money? Cause now that, I mean, some of our weed shops are closing and they're not as busy here now because Traverse City has so many and there's different places that have weed. I mean, when it first started, we were one of the first counties that had them, so a ton of people were coming and a lot of money coming in. So were we to expect that much
All the money
money?
comes in the entire state, so it's a percentage of
Is-
that.
Okay,
It's not.
All right,
just
so that
our-
amount-
About how many dispensaries you
Yeah.
How
have.
many
It's not about what they sell or their
okay.
revenue. It's
but
the
we've already
percentage.
lost a couple, right?
We
No.
lost.
We
Vacant
lost
lots.
We lost one.
We lost
Vacant.
one,
Just
but
one?
it's gonna come back because the township
Okay.
assigned where Lake and Leaf was. Somebody who worked for them.
So it's the whole
They're gonna be
state.
over.
and
Yeah,
they-
so that
Alright,
excise, it's
gotcha.
based on the revenues across the state of
Gotcha.
Michigan, and then they divvied up based on the numbers that you have,
I
the
got it.
locals and the counties. So while we lost one, the state revenue for pot is still on the increase. And so
Yes, no, I get it.
what we're getting is what we're projected to get by the state. So the number that we put in, the state says, hey, this is what we're projecting you're going to get.
Mhm.
And typically the last couple of years, that's actually been low. It's a thing across the state, I guess.
Projectable.
We just have to remember that it's by number of dispensaries.
Yep.
That gross sales.
So I'm gonna offer, would this warrant another, one meeting ad hoc committee to come up with some different options? I don't think I'm a fan of earmarking the funds to be used the same way every year. But if we could, troubleshoot perhaps ways to approach it each year. I don't know if that, either that or we walk away and come up with stuff on our own and bring it back for further discussion. I don't think it's anything we're gonna solve today.
Yeah, and it's a long-term thing. And like I said, it just goes in, whatever's extra goes into fund balance every year. That's just how it's set up. So, I mean, your decision could be to, just talk about it after every audit, maybe. And then,
Is there a
whatever's
possibility of
excess.
Keeping it separate within the general fund? I mean, is it a line item within the general fund?
It
Can we
is.
do that?
It comes in through the treasurer's office, and it's recreational marijuana and excise tax.
Okay,
So it comes in through 101-253, but after every audit, all the funds go to fund balance. That's the rules. It all goes to fund balance.
our rules?
That's the auditor's rules.
Our
but it has its
rules.
rules. So you have to re-budget the use of it in the next fiscal year.
Can we have a policy where that amount that goes into the general fund jumps back into its line item, so we're tracking?
Well, then, yes and no, but then it's gonna look like we're getting a lot more from the state, because there's one line, and so if I budget 500,000, I have to now explain that 230,000 is from the state and 230,000 is coming from fund balance.
Let me,
Because you have to budget the use of the fund balance.
let me understand the accounting of this. Within the general fund, there's several line items.
Correct?
Within those line items, we could have a line item that is just for this monies.
There already is.
All right, so it goes to the general fund, but we could still isolate it so we know how much money's available to put out to whatever activities we decide is appropriate.
Well, the expenditure lines though need to be appropriate. So it is general fund dollars. That's what they have, no earmarks when the state gives them to us. We can't just say marijuana expenditures, because what if it is operational? What if it is a contracted service? It needs to come out of the appropriate line.
Wouldn't you just do an adjustment or an amendment then?
They don't like to see those, but yes. You really want, your amendments and your adjustments should be as minimal as possible in your budget, in your audit. And the more we have, we get tick marks for that.
So it'd be advisable to try to make these kind of decisions during the budgeting process rather than waiting till after we've approved the budget.
Correct.
Okay. So we could accomplish what you're talking about. We just have to do it earlier in the year.
Right. So right now it's in the general fund. It's budgeted within the general fund. The general fund is balanced, including those funds, but we are putting a chunk of money into contingency, which is in essence the marijuana money. And so those funds can be used for what you see appropriate. So we will have a wage discussion coming up on December 10th. Are those money going towards wage changes? I don't know, but this body needs to decide how you want to use those funds.
We have to be careful about using these funds for sustainable.
Right. It was just an
Purposes.
example because
Okay.
come up.
So Katie, someone had commented about opening the Pandora's box if we were to fund something like I discussed in honor. Is there, if we were going to consider those kind of opportunities, we probably ought to make that commonly known then that we're considering it and not just doing one ask.
Yeah, I mean, you could set policy that says each year you're going to set aside $50,000 for township and village grants.
Or a percentage of.
Or a percentage, or I just say 50, or a percentage for township and village grants. And then the townships and village and cities, sorry to leave out Frankfurt. And then they would know, okay, the county has this much money, we're gonna vie for it. And then you could choose what to fund and what not to fund. You could do that.
And they would know it's competitive like a grant.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm. I
Give
know.
it back to the taxpayers.
Well, it would be getting it back to the taxpayer.
Yep.
So let me ask this question.
And it could be for a specific purpose too. So it could be available for the township, city and villages for parks and recreation, for website development, you know, you can stipulate what that money would even be used for, because to us, it is general fund dollars.
And the community's already told us the importance of recreation is to our economy. So that would be, I would see that in the broad stroke of that's meeting what the community's needs are.
Mhm.
Couple of things that have been topic of conversation over the past couple of years have been a community coordinator position,
Mhm.
which was put away or put to the wayside because the IT person need, I think, if I understand correctly, even with the renewal of the jail, there's still a shortfall.
Yep.
Be dealt with.
More so though than what you have marijuana money for.
Okay, that doesn't, yeah, which still prompts the need for that conversation. You know, there are a couple of things that have been discussed over time that the discussion is just kind of faded away, that perhaps if there is a pool of money to be dealt with, we should reignite those conversations.
I'm open to it as one commissioner, because I think we need to get these monies back into the public.
So would we like to establish some sort of work group, talk through this? Do you guys want to give me your thoughts individually? Do you want to just, I mean, because it's not a huge pool of money, but there is money. So right now, we're projected to receive about $230,000. I have 269 budgeted in contingency. So there's a difference about $39,000. Now, I will strongly urge that we keep 100 grand in contingency because that's smart and safe and all the things. So there is still a little money there.
What I would encourage, the very first road we travel down is decide as a group, what kind of activity or programming do we want to support? And then kind of narrow it down from there. Is it recreational? Is it educational? Is it infrastructure? Is part of it we want to always set aside to fill any potential gaps in our budget as the year goes along, to your point a moment ago. We could put these as a percentage in buckets and then work at it from there. You understand what I'm saying?
I think so.
And they don't necessarily have to be evenly dispersed.
Right.
I just don't want to get in don't like the idea of hiring somebody and worry about sustainability. And I mean, this can all go south in a year. Things can change.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a lot of other things change. They actually put themselves out of business and certainly see that with the tribes and their casinos that they're having issues.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna be against hiring somebody. to
Yeah,
do
I'm
something.
kind of leaning towards the tangible that the public can see what they're getting. Rather than,
Although I think, Gary, long-term, this is gonna be like the liquor tax.
People aren't gonna stop.
Yeah, this isn't going away. It could be that the use becomes greater even, I don't
Go
know.
to the state's gonna change the rules on how you can.
That'll
spend
be
it.
what-
That's more likely.
That would be my guess, but
Yeah.
just saying. No. Which would you prefer, an ad hoc committee to sit down and? You should be asking some of these folks that work here to give us their input on what they, oh, some of it probably wouldn't like, but at least maybe they have some ideas. And the committees.
Hey, Tammy, you got any ideas?
I'm still stuck in a left. So.
So
I would like to
lots
see a
of
broad
ideas.
representation though.
There's lots of ideas. Animal shelter needs a new shelter. EMS needs a third garage. Sheriff's office will always spend it if you give it to them. They need more staffing. You know, I got a dozen calls in a week saying we need more SROs.
education.
There's lots of places to spend it,
Right.
but it's what's the priority of the county and what's the priority of the
And-
board.
And hasn't it been brought up to you quite a bit? And I heard it this morning too, looking for education so people understand how we promote ideas, you know, what, help people get involved with the government, well, but educational thing, whether it's where we had the speaker with the, I know that's different, but, it seems like that is big gap. Who don't understand.
Are you saying education as a whole or education specific to marijuana?
No, not specific to
Oh, okay.
marijuana, no. Almost like what we did as the county where we did those sheets. And you went out and talked, and I know that's a person again.
I say it's like marketing, kind of.
I just think it's civic knowledge. I mean, people really don't understand. And we had 50+ openings that people were electing for here in the county. And some go on challenge, some people just don't know what they are. I think something in education and those sheets seem to work
Mhm.
hand in hand with the website. And then Christy Triggs, our elect, she mentioned that too, for education. I know we have the aquatic center. But education has been brought up quite a bit to me. I don't know what that looks like.
You're kind of talking again, what Rhonda had said, communication coordinator. And it just really can't, I'm with Gary and I think some others. It's got to be something we don't have to sustain.
One-time funding,
Year to year to year, we're making that decision.
one-time funding.
Well, that's,
Because Karen, you're right on track. We need to find a way to communicate better to the community about these opportunities, whether it be for elected positions or ballot items that are going through, et cetera. I'm gonna leave that up to the administrator to figure that out.
well, and they're starting to work on that. I think it works, you know, going and visiting stuff. But that said, I'm just saying, bringing that up because education had been brought up quite a bit. But really for the extra money, I would look for the tangible things.
Because I want to find out what Christy meant by education. That's a very big bucket.
Broad.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Civics and government taught in high school?
Not really.
That's
Yeah,
it.
I don't think I think there's one of them that's a requirement of graduation, but I'm not sure they're both a requirement of graduation anymore. And
I don't think they've had civic classes since the
And they
seventies.
focus on the federal government. I mean, they
Yeah.
don't talk local. I sent all the county government curriculum and everything to Amy Airforth and Jeff Towsley. Got zero response from them.
Amy
has
responded back
Okay.
on several things, not from Frankfurt though.
Yeah.
But
I sent,
But not
NACO puts out education curriculum for little kids, middle schoolers and high schoolers, and it focuses on county government. They have it all.
and I
Oh,
picked
I
it
hope
up-
they're teaching it.
I picked it up from the state capitol when I was there at one of our conferences and stuff and reported that, and then also shared the government for the future with Liam that is doing that with students where they kind of shadow county officials.
Hmm.
And so Amy was open to that idea, or at least responded back. But anyways, education is very broad. It's investing in our future. We all know that. And gives a more informed public. We like that. You know, where you get to make choices, but I like the ideas of you guys.
One
doing
more
it.
out there. We used to do
And
things with the townships and stuff here. MSU used to give classes, OMA, all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And I think we need to go back to some of that. It might be evening stuff, but I thought we did pretty well participation wise.
I know in the past 8 years, we've done some of that, Gary. with FOIA and OMA. And quite frankly, there must have been some results because you don't hear about people being in court as often.
Well, and when
We haven't
Tammy
had it
pulled
for
all the
quite a while.
clerks together,
Mhm.
that was
Yes.
overwhelmingly appreciated.
Kelly's pulling together the clerks, Brienne pulls together all the assessors, Tammy's pulling together all the clerks. And they're coming, so we could do some sort of stuff,
That's really great,
That would be
professional
community
development.
Outreach.
especially now. Keep building on your job. Just can't fathom when this is ever gonna.
Well, they do that with all jobs.
Well, even in the private sector,
That's what I
they're
mean,
asking
all
more
jobs.
with less for less.
Exactly.
Do I hear a consensus to bring back a consideration of an item to fund the GED program?
Yes,
Okay, so I'll bring that back in the future.
and it's a minimal,
Got away with that already.
like maximum.
When we budgeted it, we put that at 0. Yeah.
Katie,
Um,
before you leave that subject though, there's a program we have for inmates right now that help them bridge that first 30 days after they get out of incarceration to do with addictions. Is
That-
that funded by Central Wellness or have we had to drop that?
That is not dropped, no.
Okay,
That's the one I was referring to.
The map, it's map programming.
Okay, not the sobriety, but those type of bridges.
It's map programming.
Yeah. I think those are very important.
okay. Just want to make sure we hadn't overlooked it.
Anything else?
So I heard education, tangible items, one-time funding, teach classes, professional development, and then unfunded liability really had no support. I'm sorry, Gary.
I know it.
But I think. you should
Eventually,
leave
we're
the
gonna
door
But it's on the
Let us
list.
sit with it.
We
Let
still
us
love
sit
you,
with it
Gary.
and think about it.
So-
You don't retire, you.
Yeah.
As long as you don't
We've
retire.
had these conversations about MERS off and on. What I'd like to know is how much we've paid above and beyond what our monthly annual commitment to MERS is. And what it's done for us on the return.
One thing is done. for
Nothing.
us
We've
that
already
I
had
know of is when we changed, you would go from the DC program to the other end,
DB to the DC.
DC,
Right.
So
same thing, but
You-
anyway, yeah.
you made additional payments the first year I was here. And then since then, you've not budgeted for additional payments to be made. We've made just the required payments. So, but there's no, the changes have been from the market, not because of your extra payments. They've solely been from the market. Next actuarial, you're probably gonna see it go down again because it's 2-year-old data. In 2 years, you're gonna see it go up and our payment's gonna go down.
Log system.
Because it's
That's
based
fair.
on the
Right.
market and it's based on 2-year-old data from the market. The stock market is surging right now because after the election, in 2 years, you're gonna see that benefit in our actuarial. Next year's actuarial, you're not gonna see it.
You know, they use a 5-year smoothing and quite frankly, we don't get the lift that the market gives us anyway because of the way they invest it.
Mhm.
So when you see a 12 or a 15% gain, we're still only getting, maybe a 5 or 7% gain. So it really hasn't moved the needle at all.
Nope.
I tell you what, if you really wanted to do something that made a minor change, and Katie had suggested this to us last year, is fund it all at the beginning of the year. Because then you get the growth for the entire year rather than your monthly funding or
Did we
quarterly.
do that?
Yeah.
We decided we were gonna do that.
Well, we did it one time, didn't we?
We have not made it yet
don't
because
think
it's
we've
not the
done it.
first of the year yet.
Okay, but are
We're
we,
gonna make it this year.
That was the plan, is to try to make it this year. Make that one lump sum payment, yeah.
My concern is when everybody starts retiring up here on the hill, which there'll be a lot of. And that's when it's gonna hit us.
but that's already factored in. They look at who's headed towards retirement, what the payouts are gonna be. So when they say you're 63% funded, that's already assuming that 30% of your workforce is gonna collect in the next 5 years or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And it seems like making an extra payment would go to that, that influx of costs that's gonna happen. And we've looked at the data where we made extra payments and you couldn't see
based on the raw data sitting there with Radidovich, right?
Yep.
Standing up there, he couldn't say where it benefited us, making those. It was just, it leveled out. It didn't matter. It was
I'll let
just
it go.
gone.
Well,
We
and
talk
I mean,
This all the time, it's the same.
yeah,
Yeah,
it-
Tony can't give you.
You
this.
beat
can-
the dead horse.
you can bond it, freeze it, and you could have 100% unfunded liability the day after you bond it, unless you completely close the plan and shove everybody off it and buy them out. It's not gonna be fixed until everybody has deceased. Period. That's just how it is.
I've been following the communities that bonded
And,
to fully fund,
Look at
and
Grand
then
Traverse.
numbers it ticks down. They think I'm good, I'm at 110%.
Nope.
And 10 years later, they're at, 90.
Yeah, look at Grand Traverse. They
Traverse
bonded,
did
they bonded, and bam, they have unfunded liability again because there's people still living in the plan.
You know,
Actually, our biggest lift on this is when we went from defined benefit to defined contribution.
Yes.
And as we found out then, it's gonna be about 15 to 18 years. The clock's been ticking now for 2 or 3. That is probably the most important thing we could have done.
You can see that with the health department because they did that years ago.
Yep.
And we're down to 1 or 2 left. Gonna retire. But it has climbed.
The last thing I'd like to ask is based on the Conservation District's presentation, would the board support a letter of support? Maybe ask John what that would look like. They have to make application. I believe it's within December. They wouldn't find out till early spring if they were awarded the $40,000, but I believe the ask, which probably should have been at the end of the presentation, was a letter of support from the county saying we're a partner in this. And so
Was it Eagle Grant?
I believe it is.
Is it your opinion we should?
I think it'd be a great tool. I think it would show that the county is supportive
Yep.
of what the burden the townships took on and is, making efforts and being a partner and making it as easy to navigate as possible. And it helps the community too and protects the waterways. I don't think there's a downside to it at all.
And it sounds like you've been in these
I
discussions
have been in
before
these
today.
discussions. Yeah, oh yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I trust your judgment.
Was
We
that a
do that at
motion?
The next meeting.
Can't make a
I
motion.
think Katie could ask John what a letter of support would look like. They can draft it and we can
I think that's a good idea.
Oh, yeah, well. Could do it.
Anybody, anything else? Move to our last public comment. Hey, public.
Hello out there.
Get a closed public comment. Motion to adjourn or is there support?
I'll support.
All in favor, say aye.
Did the motion.
Aye.
Who did the support?
Hey.
Okay, there you go.